In a peaceful rural town where time seemed to stretch at nature's unhurried pace, and where old prejudices still lingered in every corner, an extraordinary and unexpected journey began. It was the story of Valentine, a horse born into a world that met him with scorn and rejection. Unlike the prized stallions and mares so valued by ranchers and breeders for their imposing beauty, Valentine failed to fit any established standard. Because of that, he was constantly subjected to disdainful looks and a painful isolation. Throughout his life, he carried the memories of a childhood and youth marked by rejection and discrimination, weighed down by a deep sense of not knowing his true worth. And yet, in the midst of this abandonment and marginalization, fate had reserved for him a surprising, heroic role that would redefine his entire existence. This tale begins on a gray morning, the sky heavy with storm clouds that seemed to foreshadow an uncertain road ahead. In a modest little house on the edge of the woods, Mary, a young mother who faced life's challenges with remarkable strength, struggled to preserve a sense of peace and warmth in her home. In her arms was her baby, boy Luke, a living symbol of hope and promise, embodying innocence and the possibility of renewal in trying times. But on that early morning, destiny conspired to test everyone's resilience when a violent wildfire erupted in the dry brush nearby, sending roaring flames and choking smoke swiftly across the property. As neighbors rushed about in a frenzy of cries and confusion, trying to save what was most precious, the inferno advanced mercilessly, leaving destruction and panic in its wake. Amid the chaos, Valentine, the forever dismissed and overlooked horse, felt something stir deep within him, though he had always been the scapegoat of ridicule and contempt. At that moment, a sudden spark of courage and resolve lit inside him, driving him to break through the barriers of prejudice and confront the danger with astonishing bravery. Guided by an ancient instinct and a longing for redemption, Valentine made a decision that would forever change not just his own story, but the fate of the entire community. Valentine was born on a cold winter's night, when the fields lay under a thin blanket of frost shining beneath the dim glow of the moon. His arrival was nothing like that of the other foals. Instead of celebration, the experienced eye of the ranch owner, Joseph Mansfield, narrowed in disapproval at the sight of the small horse with irregularly spotted coat, disproportionately long legs and a head that looked far too large for his frail body. "That one won't be worth the hay he eats," Joseph muttered, turning his back on the stable before the newborn could even find his footing. From that moment on, Valentine's destiny seemed set. While other foals enjoyed special care, dedicated training, and kind words, he grew up in the shadows, given only the bare minimum for survival. The days dragged on, long and lonely, filled with looks of disdain and biting remarks. Even if he couldn't fully grasp the meaning behind the words, Valentine felt them pierce his soul like invisible needles. At Breezewood Ranch, known throughout the region for its excellent bloodline horses, Valentine was the blemish on an otherwise perfect record. His odd appearance, irregular spots on a chestnut coat, a rear leg slightly shorter than the rest, and eyes many described as unsettlingly human, made him an easy target for jokes and contempt. The staff paid little attention to his needs. Visitors glanced away when passing his stall, and even the other animals with a cruel herd instinct kept their distance as though his difference were somehow contagious. "I don't know why the boss still keeps that reject around," remarked August Bradley, the head ranch hand, one day as he casually tossed a meager portion of feed into Valentine's trough. Any other would have been turned into glue or shipped off by now. Harsh words like that became the soundtrack of the horse's life, and as time passed, he developed a melancholy gaze and a drooping posture, outward signs of a spirit wounded by the world's harsh judgment. The seasons went by, and Valentine grew physically while remaining small in everyone's estimation. When the other horses were shown at fairs, he stayed hidden in the barn. When prospective buyers toured the ranch, he was kept apart, a shameful secret. His only solace came at night, when he could watch the stars through a tiny gap in the roof of his isolated stall, dreaming of freedom and acceptance. Mornings at Tew. The ranch always followed the same routine. The rooster's piercing crow signaled a new day, and soon the first rays of sunlight filtered through the clouds, painting the sky in pink and orange. That was when the ranch hands started their work, and the aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the scent of grass still wet with dew. For everyone except Valentine, it was a time of renewal and possibility. For him, it was just another day of indifference and solitude. It was on one of those seemingly ordinary mornings that fate took a turn for the neglected horse. Mary, a 23-year-old who had recently moved into a small house at the edge of the ranch, was walking along the path by the property line, carrying her 8-month-old son Luke in her arms. There was something remarkable about her. Maybe it was her quiet determination. Maybe the unconditional love radiating from every gesture toward her child. Or maybe it was simply that, like Valentine, she too knew the bitter taste of rejection. Mary was a single mother in a community that still clung to firmly held traditions. Abandoned by her boyfriend when she revealed she was pregnant, she had endured harsh judgments, closed doors, and whispered gossip behind her back. Yet unlike Valentine, she refused to internalize other people's contempt. Each disapproving stare only strengthened her resolve to raise her son with dignity and love, building a future where he would not be defined by circumstances beyond his control. That particular morning, while walking with Luke cradled to her chest, Mary paused near the fence that marked Valentine's lonely pasture. Their eyes met through the worn boards, and something unspoken passed between them. A mutual recognition, an unspoken bond that transcended words. The horse, normally skittish around strangers, cautiously approached, lowering his muzzle toward the baby, who giggled and reached out a chubby little hand in response. "Hello there, friend," Mary said softly, her kind voice a stark contrast to the harshness Valentine was used to. "It looks like you and we have something in common, huh?" She smiled, a gesture so simple yet infused with a tenderness the horse had never before experienced. In that small, seemingly insignificant encounter, a seed of hope took root in Valentine's heart. A quiet hint that, maybe, just maybe, there was more to his existence than the scorn he had known. Over the following weeks, Mary made it a part of her daily routine to visit Valentine. Sometimes she brought an apple or a carrot, other times just a few gentle words and a calm presence, someone who understood the sting of loneliness. Luke, developing rapidly as all infants do, soon recognized the horse and would squeal with delight and wave his arms whenever he caught sight of him. For Valentine, those moments were islands of joy in an ocean of isolation. Joseph Mansfield, the ranch owner, watched this unusual friendship with a mix of distrust and curiosity. "Be careful with that animal," he warned one day, finding Mary offering an apple through the fence. "He's never been properly trained. He might be unpredictable." Yet there was something about the way the horse behaved around the young woman and her child that went against everything Joseph thought he knew about this defective creature. But the quiet routine of the region was about to be shattered. That year was unusually dry, transforming thick vegetation into a dangerous stockpile of kindling. The creeks running through the ranch had shriveled to mere trickles, and the air carried a roughness that scratched at people's throats. The older residents, who still remembered similar droughts, glanced at the sky with worry and offered up old prayers for rain. Mary's simple house, where she lived with Luke, stood on the far edge of the property by the forest preserve, which still boasted a deep green in its century-old trees despite the dryness. It was a humble place, wooden walls, just 2 rooms, a small garden for herbs and vegetables, and a well that miraculously still produced fresh water despite the intense drought. It might not have seemed like much, but for Mary it was independence, a fresh start, a safe space where she could raise her son away from critical eyes. On the evening when the sunset painted the sky in bloody reds that seemed to portend disaster, Mary tucked Luke into the simple crib she'd built while pregnant. Worn out from a day of new discoveries and play, he fell asleep quickly, his small chest rising and falling in a soothing rhythm. She allowed herself a moment of quiet awe, watching the little being who had turned her life upside down in the best possible way. "Everything I do, little one, is for you," she whispered, adjusting the blanket around his tiny frame. The first indication that something was wrong came as a change in the air. an acrid smell that seemed to permeate every breath. At first, Mary chalked it up to the extreme dryness, but she soon realized something more sinister was afoot. Opening the back door, she was greeted by a terrifying sight. Flames dancing among the distant trees, casting grotesque shadows that looked like creatures from the underworld creeping inexorably toward her home. The wildfire, sparked by a fatal combination of parched vegetation and a careless spark, spread at a horrifying speed, fueled by winds that seemed to collaborate with the blaze. The sound was a brutal symphony, wood snapping under the fire's force, flames roaring hungrily through the brush, and, in the distance, the frantic shouts of those who had already noticed the danger. In mere minutes, what had been a distant worry became an immediate threat. The sky, once tinged with the soft hues of dusk, was now lit by a fierce red glow. Ash particles floated in the air like a mockery of snowfall, settling onto surfaces and leaving a powdery gray trail of destruction. At Breezewood Ranch, alarm spread with a desperate urgency reserved for true mortal danger. "Fire in the preserve!" someone shouted, sprinting among the stables. "It's moving too fast, get the animals out!" Night's peace erupted into frenzied activity, ranch hands rushing to free valuable horses, neighbors grabbing important documents and personal items, children crying in confusion and fear as they picked up on the panic around them. Seasoned by past emergencies, Joseph Mansfield organized the evacuation with methodical efficiency, placing lives above property. Drive the horses to the open field beyond the creek. The water might act as a natural barrier. His orders were followed with the precision of real dread, while a thick blanket of smoke obscured the stars in the darkening sky. In the chaos, no one remembered Valentine, confined alone in a back stall. Isolation had been his lifelong companion, and he smelled the smoke before the shouting reached him. His primal instincts flared, sending his heart pounding and his muscles tensing beneath his mottled coat. Fear, that ancient emotion shared by all living creatures, overtook him. Yet within that fear, another force emerged, an urge greater than mere self-preservation. Pushing against the loosely secured door, Valentine broke free. Instead of following the other horses in their mad rush away from the flames, he stood still for a moment, nostrils flared, taking in the chaos. Amid the pungent odor of burning wood and suffocating smoke, he detected another scent, the gentle fragrance that belonged to the little house where Mary and Luke lived, now laced with the unmistakable smell of terror. Without hesitation, as though guided by something larger than himself, Valentine headed toward the small home by the forest's edge. His hooves struck the ground with fierce determination, a drumbeat echoing the peril of the moment. The path he normally walked so leisurely during Mary's visits now felt like a passage through hell. The air was thick with smoke that choked. His lungs and fiery embers rained down from above. Meanwhile, Mary was living her own nightmare. Realizing how rapidly the flames were closing in, she thought only of Luke's safety. Holding her still sleeping baby in her arms, she grabbed a few essentials, a blanket, a bottle of water, important documents, and prepared to run. But opening the front door revealed a wall of searing heat. She recoiled instantly. The wildfire had moved far faster than anyone anticipated, surrounding the small, isolated house in a deadly ring of flame. Ravaging everything in its path, the fire turned venerable old trees into blazing torches that lit the night in a lurid glow. The main road leading back to the ranch and neighboring properties was barricaded by a rolling wave of flame, leaving no obvious escape. "Oh God, please," Mary prayed, voice thick with tears and stinging smoke. Luke, roused by the commotion and the suffocating air, began to cry, his desperate wails stabbing at his mother's heart. "It's going to be all right, my love," she murmured, unsure whether she was trying to calm her baby or herself. "We'll find a way." She scanned every option. The back door opened to an equally dire scene, fire licking through the dry brush on all sides. The well, usually a source of comfort, stood dangerously close to a burning cluster of shrubs. Each second felt like the air was being squeezed from her lungs, making each breath more difficult than the last. Then, over the roar and crackle of the flames, she caught the unmistakable sound of hooves. At first, Mary thought it must be a panic-fueled hallucination. But when Valentine's figure appeared through the swirling smoke, neighing in what seemed like an urgent summons, she realized it was real, an intervention as improbable as it was miraculous. "Valentine." Her voice was barely above a whisper, shock mixing with a glimmer of hope as the horse approached the house, braving searing heat and imminent danger with unrelenting resolve. She saw in his eyes a knowledge of the crisis that went beyond mere animal instinct. Wordlessly, he positioned himself by the door, lowering his body slightly, as if inviting her to climb on. For a split second, Mary hesitated. Entrusting her life and her child's to a horse known as unpredictable was a gamble born of sheer desperation. Then again, staying put guaranteed tragedy. Summoning courage fueled by both terror and faith, she tucked Luke securely against her chest with one arm and hoisted herself onto Valentine's back with the other. Sensing the precious cargo now resting on him, Valentine stood still until Mary was settled. Then, with a care that contrasted sharply with the urgency of the moment, he set off, choosing each step with uncanny caution. Valentine's survival instincts, honed over years of silent observation and living at the margins, found a narrow gap where the fire hadn't fully closed in. Perilous, but the only route left. It was a journey through a nightmare. Flames towered on either side of their path, so close that Mary could feel them singe her exposed skin. Burning branches fell without warning, forcing Valentine to make sudden, sharp turns. Smoke hung so thick in the air that the world turned to gray, broken only by the angry orange glow of the blaze. The roar of fire drowned out all other sounds except Luke's terrified cries, and Mary's whispered encouragements meant as much for the horse as for her child. Every step was a victory over certain death. Every yard gained a small triumph in their struggle for survival. Valentine navigated with a blend of raw strength and delicate precision, using his powerful body to shield Mary and Luke as best he could. At one critical moment, when a flaming branch crashed directly in front of them, the horse didn't flinch. He shielded Mary and Luke with his own flank, taking the brunt of the flames, his coat scorched and singed, but never slowing. Those few minutes battling through the inferno felt like an eternity. But at last, they emerged into the open field beyond the main line of fire, where locals and ranch staff had gathered in frantic efforts to contain the blaze. The sight of the trio was met with collective disbelief and awe. Joseph Mansfield, who had been coordinating the initial firefighting efforts with volunteers, froze in the middle of giving instructions when he saw Mary, her face streaked with soot and eyes red from the smoke, still clutching Luke tightly while astride the horse. Everyone had dismissed. Valentine, his coat singed in patches and bearing fresh burns, stood upright, more dignified than anyone had ever seen him. "Dear God," Joseph murmured, rushing to help Mary dismount. How in the world? That area was completely cut off by the fire. We were just about to send a rescue team, but we thought it was too late. Eager hands took Mary and Luke, offering water, clean blankets, and urgent medical care. Valentine lingered as though unwilling to stray far from those he had just saved. His normally sorrowful eyes glowed with something new, not merely the reflection of the distant flames, but a deeper light that spoke of rediscovered worth. The hours that followed were consumed by frantic efforts to tame the fire. Firefighters from the nearest town arrived, joining volunteers to halt the blaze before it could swallow more of the region. Mary's home was completely destroyed, along with parts of the forest preserve and some outbuildings of the ranch. But the most important things, both human and animal lives, had been spared, largely thanks to the actions of a horse once deemed worthless. As the initial wave of adrenaline receded and the magnitude of the disaster became clear, news of the extraordinary rescue spread. Witnesses described what they'd seen to those arriving later, each retelling enhancing the drama, until Valentine's heroism took on almost mythic proportions. "He charged through a wall of fire like he was untouchable," said one. "I swear he dodged a flaming branch as though he knew exactly where it would fall," remarked another. "It was like he saw a path none of us could see," added a third. After Mary received basic medical care for minor burns and smoke inhalation, she refused to leave Valentine's side, While Luke slept in the arms of a kind neighbor, Mary stayed by the horse, tending to his burns with improvised ointments and murmuring her thanks, words which felt all too small for what he'd done. "I just don't understand," Joseph said, watching them with a mix of admiration and confusion. "For years I thought this horse was a waste, good for nothing. How could I have been so wrong?" The answer came from someone unexpected, August Bradley, who had always been particularly harsh on Valentine. "Maybe the problem wasn't the horse at all," he said, voice rough from smoke and long withheld emotion. "We wanted a show champion, a top breeder, and we never asked what he really was. A creature with more courage and loyalty than any pedigree could ever promise." By dawn, a light rain joined the firefighters' efforts, and the flames were finally brought under control. Though Mary's home was gone and parts of the ranch lay in smoking ruins, the collective sense of relief was palpable. Human and animal lives had been spared. Mary had lost nearly all her belongings but had gained something infinitely more precious, a profound understanding of true worth and a bond with Valentine that defied any rational explanation. Later that day, Joseph Mansfield approached Mary with a straightforward offer. "There's plenty of space in the main house. You and Luke can stay there as long as you need, until you rebuild or find somewhere else." Before she could reply, he added, "And Valentine is yours now if you'll have him. I think he's already made his choice anyway." In the weeks and months that followed, the tale of the outcast horse who became a hero spread far beyond the borders of that quiet little town. Local journalists covered the story. Animal behavior experts debated the protective instinct he had shown. Curious onlookers dropped by Breezewood Ranch, hoping to catch a glimpse of the horse some had started calling the firefighter horse. With the community's help, people who now embraced her wholeheartedly, Mary rebuilt her home. It was bigger and safer than the one before. Valentine got a special stall close to the new house, though he spent most days free to wander the ranch. Luke, growing at a quick clip like all children, formed an unbreakable bond with the horse. Often Mary would find him dozing off, leaning against Valentine's warm flank on lazy summer afternoons. For local folks, the story morphed into a modern legend, a reminder that genuine value isn't about outward perfection or meeting expectations, but about the actions that spring from courage and selfless love. Children from the region came by regularly, bringing carrots, apples, or made-up tales of his imagined heroic exploits. Deeply moved by the experience, Joseph Mansfield overhauled the ranch's entire philosophy. "Every animal has its own intrinsic worth," he said to visitors. "Our job isn't to judge them by appearances or hold them to rigid standards, but to recognize and respect each creature's unique nature." The breeder who once cared only about perfect bloodlines and strict conformation standards now spoke with the hard-won wisdom gleaned from an ordeal of fire and redemption. About a year after the blaze, a simple ceremony took place in the center of town. The mayor, in appropriate solemnity, unveiled a bronze statue depicting Valentine with Mary and Luke on his back, forever immortalizing in metal the moment of courage that had changed not just 3 lives, but the entire community. "This monument," declared the mayor, "doesn't just honor one heroic act. It reminds us of a fundamental truth we often overlook in our rush to judge and categorize. Real value isn't found in outward perfection or meeting our preconceived expectations. It resides in inner strength, in our capacity to love, and in our willingness to act when others shrink back." Among the crowd that gathered for the ceremony, Valentine stood calmly, seemingly unaware he was the center of attention. His eyes, once so full of sorrow, now shone with a quiet serenity, the peace of a being who had found his place in the world not through anyone else's acceptance, but by discovering his own inherent worth. Mary, observing the horse that had risked everything to save her, realized a truth that would forever shape her life. Sometimes we have to pass through fire to discover who we really are. The flames that almost consumed them had also burned away the veils that kept everyone from seeing the greatness concealed within a creature dismissed as ordinary. As the seasons rolled on, the community found new stories to tell. The scars left by the fire slowly became less visible, replaced by fresh greenery, determinedly pushing up through the ashes. Valentine's own burn marks remained as silent witnesses to his bravery, yet only added to his beauty in the eyes of those who knew his tale. His scars, they said, were more precious than any pedigree. On a bright spring afternoon, with Luke nearly 2 years old and toddling through wildflowers near the house, a group of veterinary students from the state university came to study Valentine's extraordinary behavior. What they learned went far beyond technicalities. "What do you see when you look at this horse?" asked their professor, a perceptive woman in her mid-40s with a kind smile. "I see an unlikely hero," one student replied, pushing her glasses up on her freckled nose. "I see proof that appearances can be deceiving," another added, scribbling notes in his journal. The professor nodded, pleased but still wanting them to dig deeper. "What does Valentine teach us about our own humanity?" A hush fell over the group, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant sounds of other horses. It was Mary who finally broke the silence, holding Luke's small hand as she spoke. "He teaches us that we're more than the labels people give us, more than the expectations placed on us. He reminds us that a life's worth can't be measured by arbitrary ideas of perfection, but by the capacity to love and protect the ones who truly matter." Her voice was gentle, yet carried the conviction of someone who had lived every word. The students reflected on her reply, some hurriedly writing it down, others quietly contemplating the horse now grazing nearby, oblivious to the profound lessons he represented. Valentine, once shunned but now a symbol of courage and rebirth, went about his day with the unassuming simplicity only true heroes possess. At night, after Luke was tucked into his crib, Mary often sat on the porch of her rebuilt home, gazing at Valentine's silhouette against the starlit sky. In those moments of stillness, she recalled the terror of the flames, the suffocating heat, the fear that nearly paralyzed her. And then, as if conjured from some miracle, the horse who had carried her to safety when all seemed lost. "Fire reveals a person's true character," Joseph Mansfield had once remarked. A new friend and steadfast support for Mary. Some flee, others freeze, and a rare few run right into it when everyone else is running away. "I think we all have a fire inside us," Mary mused. In Valentine, that fire was just waiting for the right moment to show its real brilliance. Valentine's story gradually transcended mere facts to become a narrative with deeper truths. Teachers in local schools used it to discuss inclusion, to look beyond appearances, and to explore how quiet courage can dwell in the most unexpected places. A small publishing house produced a children's book, Valentine, the Fire Horse, and it soon became popular reading throughout the region. By the time Luke turned 5, he was old enough to ask questions about the fire and Valentine's role in saving them. "Why did people think he wasn't good for anything, Mom?" he asked one afternoon, patting the horse's muzzle as it lowered protectively near him. Mary paused, choosing words her son's young heart could grasp without diluting the truth. "Sometimes people only look at what's on the outside, sweetheart. They see differences and call them flaws. They don't see what's underneath, the courage, loyalty, and love." She gave him a moment to absorb the thought. Valentine taught us to look with our hearts, and that might be the most important lesson of all. As if understanding the conversation's theme, Valentine stepped closer and gently rested his muzzle on Luke's shoulder. The boy laughed and hugged the horse with the pure abandon of childhood. In that simple gesture lay an unspoken promise to carry the hard-earned lesson forward, to never judge a living being by appearances alone, but by what the heart perceives. Years continued to roll by, each season adding a new chapter to a story that had become woven into the community's very identity. Valentine aged gracefully, passing many a peaceful morning grazing near Mary's new home and spending afternoon hours with Luke, who grew tall and strong with every passing day, and who owed his life to a horse no one else had thought worth saving. When researchers in animal behavior came to analyze Valentine's remarkable actions that night, hoping to find a clinical explanation, they found themselves confronting phenomena that went beyond scientific instruments and definitions. "Some things just aren't measurable," one researcher concluded after weeks of observation. There are connections science can't fully explain, choices that seem guided by a comprehension almost human. The once judgmental community, humbled by the events of that fateful night, embraced a more inclusive and compassionate outlook. Breezewood Ranch, previously renowned only for immaculate bloodlines, became a safe haven for horses other breeders turned away. Animals with minor deformities, orphaned foals, horses rescued from neglect. Each was given a name, proper care, and the opportunity to show their own unique worth. Inspired by everything she'd experienced, Mary started a small program offering therapeutic riding for children with special needs. Every being has special gifts to share, she explained to parents. We just have to give them the chance to reveal their true value. Despite his advancing years, Valentine played a key role in these sessions, especially gentle with the most vulnerable children, as if he sensed in them a reflection of his own history of rejection and discovery. One crisp autumn afternoon, golden leaves swirling in the breeze and sunlight fading into brilliant reds and oranges, the community held a commemorative gathering. It marked 10 years since the Great Wildfire, a date once marked by tragedy, but now celebrated as a symbol of nature's resilience and human renewal. In the central plaza, at the foot of Valentine's bronze statue, children and adults laid flowers and shared stories. Luke, now 11 and possessing his mother's unwavering gaze, stood by the statue with Valentine's reins in hand. The horse appeared untroubled by the crowd or the music playing in his honor. "What's on your mind, son?" Mary asked gently, noticing Luke's thoughtful expression. He patted Valentine's neck before answering, "I'm thinking about how one choice can change everything. If he'd run with the other horses, away from the fire." He trailed off, his voice catching. "But he didn't," Mary finished softly. "He took the hardest, most dangerous path because something inside him knew it was the right thing to do. And that's the lesson for us all. Our choices, even when they're tough, define who we really are." The celebration stretched long into the night with music, dancing, and shared meals. Yet for the three at the heart of this story, Mary, Luke, and Valentine, the most meaningful moment came afterward, when they quietly slipped away from the crowd and walked home under the starlit sky. In that peaceful darkness, looking up at the same stars Valentine had once watched in solitude, Mary understood that the true miracle wasn't only about surviving the flames, it was about a profound transformation for everyone involved. The fire that nearly claimed their lives had also burned away prejudice and fear, revealing the hidden truth of every being's immeasurable worth. And so, the story of the horse once considered worthless, who galloped into an inferno to save an innocent life, continues to be told and retold. It passes down through generations, an enduring reminder of a simple but essential fact. In the words inscribed on the statue's base, real worth is never found in outward perfection, but in the courage within and the ability to love without limits.